You're listening to The Russell Scott Show.
Daniel Estulin, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's great to be on the show.
I'm your host, Peter Kling. I'm sitting in for Russell Scott. I'm author of Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. We should have a really good program because, Daniel, I've researched some of the things that you're an expert in, so I have just a little bit of a modicum of an idea on what's going on in this world. I want to read your bio here. It's really interesting. Daniel is an award-winning investigative journalist and an international best-selling author. He has written several books, including The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, Shadow Masters, and his latest, The Octopus Deception. Daniel Estulin appeared on Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura and has a weekly show on Russia Today and can be heard as a frequent guest on The Alex Jones Show. Again, welcome. I'm impressed with your bio here. I have to ask one question right off the bat. The Octopus Deception, this is your latest book?
That's right, it is.
How did you come up with the title? I have an idea, but how did you come up with the title?
Well, you know, the Octopus Deception is actually based on a lot of work which was done by a late investigative journalist, Danny Casolaro, who was killed by the people who was investigating. The Octopus Conspiracy is actually the book that he was working on. It's a novel, although about 90% of what you read in the novel is based on true blue investigative journalism. And again, Octopus Deception exists, and it is absolutely real in this parallel universe of smoke and mirrors. It's the world unknown to most people, and it's a place where governments, intelligence agencies, and secret societies battle for control of the world. And Danny Casolaro, unfortunately, was one of the victims of this battle, and the book actually begins with recreation of his death, which was real-life death, unfortunately, and it just takes off from there.
I'm sure a lot of our audience had looked at the Olympics last year, watched the Olympics, and if you notice the closing ceremony of the Olympics, about the last thing that they did was roll out a giant octopus.
That's right. Well, octopus is an interesting figure. I mean, octopus has 8 hearts, which means you can't kill it. And it also has 8 extremities, so 8 hands, so it's always eating. So there's no way actually to get at it. That's one of the reasons that octopus is such a popular figure amongst the secret societies and as well amongst the elite. And in this case, octopus was certainly a symbol used by Casolaro and for my book as I think is a appropriate title. And Octopus Deception certainly tells you a great deal about what the book is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what I find interesting is that they rolled this out in front of the whole world, made it blatant that we are in control and we have our tentacles everywhere. And that brings us to really the subject of today's conversation. This weekend at the Grove Hotel in Watford, England, roughly 140 participants are expected to attend this year's Bilderberg Meeting. And journalists, as we know, are banned from attending, and that's always been the case. Daniel, what do you think their talking points are going to be?
Well, that's an interesting subject. I think one of the key areas, obviously, has to do with what they're going to do with Iran. Another key area of discussion is how to avoid future bubbles, such as the financial bubble of the housing meltdown, which we've suffered going back to 2007. These are the key points, but the key point, you know, I'd have to say that it's going to be future technologies and the control that the elite have over future technologies, which will play a very, very big role in how the future world, not conflicts as much as a control of society will unfold over the next, I'd say, year or two from now.
We don't know a lot of the people that attended. Some investigators have actually sat there and tried to videotape people as they were coming by. We know that journalist Tom Brokaw was an attendee several years ago. They have this agenda there that they're rolling out. Now, just how in control is this agenda? I mean, are they handed down this agenda and they say, okay, well, this is the agenda of this year, and they give everybody an assignment? Or exactly what's your perspective of what goes on in the Bilderberg meetings?
Well, I think first of all it's important to discern what Bilderberg is, what from what it is not. There's a lot of nonsense out there about what Bilderberg conferences are. Bilderberg is not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy reality. There are many people who go off the deep end and try to make more of the Bilderberg group than it actually was and is, which is kind of absurd. Now, Bilderberg was a very important element of the oligarchical structures of the Cold War period, and that in and of itself is pretty significant factor, because what it means, or rather what it meant, was that it was a vehicle through which private financier oligarchical interests were able to impose their policies on what is nominally sovereign governments, and also, needless to say, to dominate the narrative within the media in much of the West. Now, the biggest scandal part of it was that it was heavily populated by people who came out of the old World War II Nazi apparatus, who basically cleaned up and dusted off and employed to become a hardcore of the Cold War anti-Soviet structures in the West. Now, the organizations such as Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, they have operational missions. They're not the seats of power. I know there's a lot of people out there who talk about, the evil eye, the all-seeing eye of the Jewish Masonic conspiracy. There's no conspiracy, with a lot of people, their infantile fantasies, go off the deep end and make them into something that they're not. No group of people, I don't care how powerful they are, sit around the dark, a table in a dark room, holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's domination. What it is, you can call it an aristocracy of purpose, in other words, between the European and North American elites on the best ways to manage the planet. And the final objective of this, the whole Bilderberg thing is to create not one world government, but rather one world company limited, corporations with a lot more power than any government on the planet. And we see that, with key individuals on the international level, such as Mario Draghi, Mario Monti, former Prime Minister of Italy, or the current head of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. The people from, they all belong to organizations such as Goldman Sachs. And this is an idea of what corporations with more power than governments is really all about.
So it comes down to who's controlling the government, who's controlling the corporations, actually, and how the corporations are influencing the government then.
Well, obviously, because the oligarchical principles work on different and higher levels, and so what they do is they create the multiplicity of front organizations whose job is to radiate out the idea that already has been predetermined at a much higher level than the Bilderberg Group, and obviously much more exclusive level. And one of these exclusive organizations, speaking from the American point of view, is Skull and Bones, a secret society which is based on Bavarian Illuminati. Which was founded in the United States in 1832, and we wouldn't know anything about Skull and Bones had it not been for this lady, Charlotte Iserberg, who passed a whole bunch of documents, actually boxes of documents and information, to investigative journalist Anthony Sutton, who has now passed away a few years back, because her father and her grandfather were members of Skull and Bones. She knew very, very well who they were, and they are in fact a secret society now, not so much so, but they certainly were for a very, very long time, because no one knew anything about them, didn't know that they actually even existed.
And when you start looking at the roster of who's attended Skull and Bones, it's the top people in the United States. I believe both Bushes have gone to Skull and Bones, if I recall correctly, or were members of Skull and Bones.
That's right. The Bushes have gone to Skull and Bones. They have never been to a Bilderberg meeting. Now, Bilderberg is, again, it's political, it's media, it's financial, it's government, it's what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. They're key corporations, key individuals, but again, they're not the seats of power, because you have a lot of people who go to these meetings, such as European commissioners, and European commissioner cannot be considered anywhere near individuals such as the Queen of England or the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. So again, you have some important individuals, and Bilderberg was certainly a very important group way back in the 50s and the 1960s, but it certainly has, become, more of an also run. Actually, this year's meeting is quite interesting, because for the first time, they're actually letting, the public and the media play part. In other words, they have a press office this year who's going to be passing out information about what the meeting is about. And I think my book, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, which has been published in 83 countries and sold millions of copies worldwide, certainly has a very important role to play in actually finally forcing the Bilderbergers, to become a lot more transparent about what they do at these meetings.
So essentially, you brought up the one point about the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Queen of England. These are three of the most powerful families on the face of the earth.
Well, actually, they're not. I think it's there are certain misconceptions, again, that people have about how the world runs, which we should address. The fact that the name David Rockefeller, and I know all your listeners know exactly who David Rockefeller is, that just goes to show you that David Rockefeller is not an important individual, because truly important people, their names are absolutely unknown. I think that has to be very obvious to most people. If you type in Rockefeller, you get 150 zillion pages. If you type in Daniel Estulin, you get about 2 million pages on Google. Am I important? No, I'm absolutely unimportant. I'm nobody when you compare it to really, really important people, because, again, one of the most important families in the world is an old black Venetian nobility family, the Frescobaldis, which is basically the root of all the European royalty. Now, if you type their name into Google search engine, you get about 2 results, and both of them have to do with wineries. And you can also say the same thing about the Rothschilds. Most of the information you get about them on Google search engine has to do with their, wine operations all over the world, or their castles, their real estate operations, their horses. It has very little to do with actually what they do in the world, or their close links to the British royal family and the operations such as the Inter-Alpha Group, which controls about 70% of the world's, financial money flows. So that just goes to show you how this, parallel universe of smoke and mirrors really, really work. And I have a document of one of the most important German families, Baron Krupp, spelled K-R-U-P-P, for those interested to investigate further. Now, these were the 19th century German industrialists, the real power behind the Nazi rise back in the 1920s, along with the Loebs and J.P. Morgans and the Rockefellers and so on and so forth. And, this one document that I have, one extract of one bank account. In this one bank account, they have $112 trillion. Yes, you heard me right. Trillion with a T for Toronto. And that's just one bank account. And if I found over 3,000 bank accounts belonging to this individual, and you start adding it all up, that's the real money in the world, not the things that, Forbes magazine tell us this nonsense about.
I absolutely agree with that, because when you go look for, who's the richest man in the world, that they'll point toward Bill Gates, and he's got, $50 billion or whatever it is this year, depending on how Microsoft stock is doing.
Well, that's chump change.
Yeah, it is. When I was doing my research on the Rothschilds, and this was several years ago, I came across information that said that they controlled over $500 trillion. One family controlling that much money. Whoa!
I don't know I really don't know if that's the case or not. But the thing is that I can tell you, based on the documents I have, original documents, that the Krupps, that's how much money they have in one bank account. So, again, it's why do they tell us that the Bill Gates of the world are the most powerful, the richest at least, people in the world, the Buffetts? Well, because again, real wealth of people who are powerful can never be revealed. That's how it works.
I was told a long time ago that fools' names and fools' faces are always found in public places.
Touché, absolutely. That's exactly how it works.
When I was doing my investigative work, I could only get up to these families that everybody knows is out there, and they take the brunt of it. But there's a control behind that, because you can you can track these families. When we're talking about the control that is going on this planet, I think that we're looking at centuries-old bloodlines that can be probably traced all the way back to the Egyptian Empire.
Well, I haven't traced any of them that far back, but I certainly have traced a lot of them, back to about the Fourth Crusade, beginning in 1200, 1204, which is, basically, the beginning of the Venetian black nobility families. And if you go back, 800 years back to, 1200, and now we're into the 21st century, you can trace a lot of these families, especially on the European level, because, again, the Venetian black nobility, eventually took over England once it became England, and then it turned them into Great Britain through William of Orange, conquest of England, for those who are interested a little bit in history, and what we see today, the empires and of the world, there's really only one empire. That's the British Empire, and people talk about the American century. All this is nonsense, because if you really look behind, these fools who run the United States, it's the same old British Empire, because Wall Street basically, although it's nominally American, it's really British. It was British by the people who founded it, and it's still British today as far as the interests are concerned and their allegiance.
About 25 years ago, I went to London, and it was my first trip to London, and in somewhere about the first 24 hours I was there, I came to the conclusion that the United States is still the colonies.
Absolutely, still the colonies. It's never stopped being the colonies, and that's a very, very good assessment. Absolutely.
We know the organizations are there, but I agree with everything that you're saying. The Bilderbergs essentially are just the errand boys.
Well, the funny thing about Bilderberg and England is that, talking about the future, back at their 2005 meeting in Rotterdam in Germany, that's actually one of the wealthiest little towns I think in the world. They have more billionaires per number of citizens in the town than I think anyone in the world. It's like 6,000 people live in this little town, Rotterdam. I think something that had like 12 or 13 billionaires living there. So at that 2005 Bilderberg conference in Rotterdam, what Bilderberg actually talked about is the future of humanity, and this future of humanity was written up in a 2007 document which Bilderberg prepared for the UK's Ministry of Defence. Not that Ministry of Defence is important, but Bilderberg basically used them as the cover to get their ideas out into the public, or sort of into the public. It was a kind of a private document. And this UK Ministry of Defence's document was called 2007-2036 Future Trends Report. And in this report, they basically talked about what the future from the technological perspective is going to look like. And I tell you one thing, it's a frightful document, and people should definitely get to know it.
I say the best laid plans of mice and men. Let's hope that their plans don't exactly work out. I have to ask you, something that's on a lot of people's minds is the depopulation program. Eugenics has been traveling. That word has been used among the royals and those in power for almost 100 years now. And you look at the different plagues that are released upon the earth, that it seems like between AIDS and Ebola and the HN viruses that seem to always pop up out of Southeast Asia. Is this part of the plan of the Bilderbergs to reduce the population of the earth?
Well, again, it's not so much part of the Bilderberg group. It's part of the elite. It has always been part of the elite. And it's very easy to explain. You see, there are 7 billion people on the planet Earth. And planet Earth is a very small planet with limited natural resources. Now, what's going to happen when we get to, let's say, 10 billion, 15, 20, 30, 50 billion people in the next, 50, 100, 200 years? What's going to happen to the natural resource of the planet, to water, and to the food supply? So if you're people like David Rockefeller, which is, again, just a metaphor for powerful people, because, again, I'm using his name because everybody knows who he is.
He's in the public eye.
Exactly. So if you're the Rockefellers of this world, for them to eat, most of us, the great unwashed, as they call us, have to die. And that's one of the reasons, if you extrapolate it just a little bit further, you see all this stuff going on over the past 30, 40 years, especially such as, zero growth, a term most people are familiar with, at least most of your listeners. We see it all the time in the mainstream press. Now, what does it mean, zero growth? Well, progress and development is directly proportional to population density, which means that if we have progress, we have technological development, we're going to have more people on the planet Earth, more money, more families, which means that the Rockefellers are going to have to divide all the food and water with more and more people. Consequently, if you can reduce the world's population, you're not going to have to do it as much. Now, how do you reduce the world's population? It's very expensive to kill people. Okay, again, you don't have 4 old geezers sitting in a dark room holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's domination. It doesn't work like that. Now, if you can destroy the world's economy on purpose, okay, what you're doing is you're destroying the development and the base of the population, because we're going to get to a point very, very soon when we're going to need very high level of technology in order to support such a huge population base. If you go back, 2,000 years, you can use wood, or 1,800 years, you can use wood as the energy source. Then we used coal as the energy source. Then we used oil when there is 4 or 5 billion people. But what are you going to do when you have 10, 15 billion people? You're not going to use oil. You need a higher energy source, which is nuclear energy, and then you're going to use fusion. So we're always going to higher, energy flux density, because again, the higher energy flux density allows more people on the planet to live comfortably, and that's something that the Rockefellers of the world simply cannot afford to have. So if you can destroy the population, the energy and the progress and development of society, you can destroy the population base. And this is exactly what they're doing. And most people think that the Rockefellers of this world, they need more people because they need to sell us trinkets. Well, they don't need to sell us anything because they already own most of the world. And if you don't believe me, just think back anytime you go on holidays, any nice piece of real estate anywhere in the world is owned by someone wealthy. That just goes to show you on a very, basic scale how things are really run in the world. So again, it's logical. The depopulation agenda is a very big part for the elite. It has always been a very big part of the elite. And again, going back to this report I just mentioned, 2007-2036, strategic trends report put out by the British government. Key themes of the report addressed population and resources of the planet Earth, and what basically, and I quote from the report, they talked about an increased risk of humanitarian catastrophe caused by a mixture of climate change, resource pressures, uneven distribution of wealth, the effect of disease, and the failure of authorities to cope with population growth and urbanization. Again, tongue-in-cheek from, as far as we're concerned, because we know that they know that this is a problem. But how are they planning to deal with all of this? Through high technology, and through the technology which they will use to control the world's population.
How soon do you think we're going to see something come about? I've heard ripples through the economic world to get your stocks out of the market by September. It seems that we've got strange things happening within the markets, the financial markets, especially in gold and silver. The demand for gold seems to be outrageous, and yet the prices are falling. Something's going on here in the financial markets. Can we expect a collapse soon? Are they going to pull this little trick that they have up their sleeves and catch the whole world off guard?
That's an interesting question. Again, gold is another interesting issue. We're seeing right now how the gold price seems to be plummeting, and that just goes to show you that people are not exactly sure what to do with the economy, and especially with the prices with the precious metals, gold and silver. The real story behind gold is that there's a lot more gold in the world than we've been told. That goes back to the World War II operations, such as the Golden Lily operation, where the Japanese basically plundered all of gold in Southeast Asia between 1936 and 42. Most of that gold is hidden in the jungles of Indonesia, Philippines, and Malaysia. So what we've been told about gold is kind of the same, nonsensical story we've been told about the diamonds, which we've been told are, girls' best friends and are precious, which they're not precious. They're worth exactly the same as any piece of rock you find on the street. But, again, media propaganda told us something else. As far as what you said about the stock markets, let's just start by saying that Wall Street is a sideshow. It is not the truth. It's an amusement park, a traveling circus, a group of jugglers, belly dancers, storytellers, singers, and strippers. It's just people have been hypnotized, by Wall Street. They sit there day after day, night after night, taking notes and margin calls, spreads, incentives, financial derivatives. I mean, this is madness. This is an entire generation of people who don't know anything about the economy. They didn't come out of some, pundit on Wall Street. Wall Street has become the gospel and the ultimate generation or revelation, a dirty trick perpetrated by dirty old men. That's what Wall Street is. And what people need to understand, that stock market results have absolutely nothing to do with reality, and they have nothing to do with the economy. It's a freak sideshow. It should not be shown to children under the age of 18.
That's an interesting observation of it, and I have to say it's a fairly accurate observation. The people of the world, they buy and trade stocks, and corporations are buying and trading stocks, and the guys on top are all laughing at us.
I mean, absolutely, they're laughing. I mean, they already pulled all their money out. They have it hidden in the offshore accounts or in Switzerland. You know what I mean? And they tell you just to keep buying so they can steal more of your money. I mean, it's logical. Wall Street has nothing to do with the economy. The real economy has nothing to do with, with profits of corporations on Wall Street. Money works on a different level. Money has no intrinsic value. You know what makes the world go around? The creative capacity of 7 billion people and our ability as people to discover universal principles of nature which increase and improve the lives of people per square kilometer of space against nature. That's what works, not Wall Street derivatives markets.
Yeah, and something that we've been warned about, if you listen to the right people, watch the derivatives markets, because when the derivatives markets crack, expect the fall. And
exactly.
that's just about ready to happen. It may have already happened. Daniel, I know we're short on time here. If you have some last-minute advice to give to our listeners, I would certainly appreciate you sharing that with us.
Well, I would really like for them to read my new book, The Octopus Deception, because again, 90% of it is fiction, but 90% of it is real, although it is a work of fiction. It's a kind of a mix of John le Carré and Robert Ludlum. If you like Bourne Identity, if you like reading these kinds of fast-paced action books, this is what Octopus Deception is all about. It was published in Spain a year and a half ago. It was #1 for 24 straight weeks. I think a lot of people will be very, very surprised because most people know me as an investigative journalist who writes nonfiction books. But again, most of the stuff in Octopus Deception is nonfiction, although I had to, narrate it because there was just too many personal dangers involved in revealing some of these terrifying deeds of this octopus group, such as the Promise Conspiracy. Another part of it which is very, very real, is called Collateral Trading Programs, CTP. Now, if you remember back in 2010, I think the month of May, when the markets plummeted something like 16% in 10 minutes, and everyone thought, well, the world was coming to the end. And then by the end of the day, they somewhat recovered and only, lost about 5% of the market price for the day. Well, for them actually to do this, for the markets to lose 16% in 10 minutes, and then actually, recover somewhat by the end of the day, someone has to have a hell of a lot of money to be able to move the world markets at such rate. Well, these people actually exist. They're real. And the program, which is a super duper pooper super secret program called Collateral Trading Program in America, these people are known as Plunge Protection Team. And I have in my possession copies of the original CTP certificates that, when you add them together, come to a mind-boggling amount of $223,104,000,008.03. And this is the money that goes missing in my book, The Octopus Deception, as kind of a backdrop, because the backdrop to the book is the financial Armageddon. And, the President of the United States, the three heroes in the novel, different secret societies, and somebody even more powerful than the octopus, they're all looking for this money or trying to keep, find this money for whatever, for personal reasons. But basically, unless somebody finds this money, the world will collapse into oblivion, because without this money to back up, the economy of the world is going to hell in a basket. And this is a fast-paced work of fiction, which I think a lot of people will find very, very fun to read.
I'm tempted to ask, do they find the money? Read the book, right?
I'm just going to tell you this, that, you can read this book on different levels. On the basic level, it's a very, fun adventure. But there's also a more serious level to the novel. It's basically a study of a loss in all of its manifestations. Every one of the characters in the novel has lost something or someone important in their lives, from Simone Casolaro, Danny Casolaro's sister. In real life, he didn't have a sister, but in the novel, he does. She loses her brother and goes on this quest to find and avenge his loss. Her boyfriend, who always loses her. Another character, Curtis, an army ranger, loses most of his friends in a war. Even the planet Earth is about to be lost to this collective insanity of a powerful few who wish to control the world in the name of many. Order out of chaos. And that's what the book is about. And I'm not going to tell you if they save the world or not.
To find out that information, you got to go to my book, Letters to Earth. You Can Survive Armageddon.
God bless you. Yeah.
It's been.
Or maybe we can do 2 for 1.
There you go. There you go. Find the inside, get the inside information, and then learn how to get through this mess.
Exactly.
I've totally enjoyed the time that we spent together, Daniel.
Likewise.
Is there a movie in the works?
Yes, there is. The true story, the Bilderberg group, is being developed into a documentary. We're actually in the post-production stage, working on the original score, and it should be in the cinemas by late October, early November. The true story of the Bilderberg group documentary.
That's fantastic. We'll be looking for that. Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, the easiest way to do it is through my webpage, danielestulin.com. I also have a TV show on RT. RT is Russia Today. It's the Russian, I wouldn't say it's state because it's not state privately owned. And the show is called, in Spanish, Desde la Sombra, Out of the Shadows or From the Shadows. And it's a 30-minute weekly interview show, hardcore investigative journalism.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you for being our guest today. And I'm sure Russell thanks you as well. Folks, this is the Russell Scott Show, and I've been your guest host, Peter Kling. You can find more about me at www.peterkling.com, or come join me on Facebook. Just look up Peter Kling. Read Letters to Earth. You can survive Armageddon, and we'll get through this Bilderberg mess. Folks, thanks for being with us. Have a great day. Daniel, thank you again, and I wish you all the best in your future adventures, and stay safe, my friend.
Peter, take care of yourself. Thank you for having me on your show.